So welcome to AARP's Washington's presentation on downsizing and decluttering. You spend a lifetime accumulating treasures, trinkets, and memories. All that stuff can make downsizing feel like a monumental task. Thank you for joining us today as we share tips to tackle even the most daunting task of decluttering and preparing for your next stage in life. But before we start, I'd like to tell you a bit about today's speakers. Kay Tomlinson has been an AARP volunteer speaker for about 3 years since retiring from a successful business career. She is coming to us today from her home in Lake Tapps. And as I said before, my name is Pat Johnson, and I'm today's other speaker. And I've been a volunteer speaker for about 4 years after retiring from careers in sales, government, and medical research. And I live in West Seattle. So now, without further ado, Kay and I will be presenting downsizing and decluttering. And I look forward to facilitating today's conversation about downsizing. Next slide. So this is King Tut, and you've probably seen him before. He's a pretty familiar icon, and we'll have more to say about him later. Next slide, please. So our agenda today is to basically help us all gain a general understanding of why stuff is so important to some people and to learn practical, easy to follow downsizing, decluttering tips. And I myself downsized and moved in 2019 from a 3,000 square foot house, 2 levels, to a 1,600 square foot condo, 1 level. So I've gone through this process myself and know it well. Next slide. So one thing to remember is that Americans are getting older, and we're the fastest growing demographic around. 2011 marked the beginning of a large age wave with over 10,000 people turning 65 every day in the US. And this is going to be for the next 20 years. And if you look at this chart, again, the numbers on top of the years are in millions.
Wow.
15% of America is over 65 right now, and in 40 years, 33% of America will be over 65. This will be the largest, most powerful buying group in America. And Kay, I think it's your turn now.
Okay, thank you. And Pat, I have to say I envy you that you've already gone through this process. My husband thinks it's hilarious that I'm digging into this presentation. We've lived in our home for 35 years, so you can just imagine the stuff.
Yeah, we lived in ours for 20, so I can.
Yep, there you go. See,
I'm happy to share what I've learned.
Wonderful. Well, and I really like this slide that you're seeing on the screen now. Generations, excuse me, and their stuff. And I don't know about y'all, but I sometimes get confused about, where the baby boomers start and end, and then who are the millennials, and where does Gen X fit in there? It seems like every generation, every period of time has a name. I'm not quite sure what the current name is, anything after 96, but, it's really the idea of these two oldest generations, the silent generation and baby boomers. When you stop and think about it, they really have the most stuff, things that they've accumulated through their lifetime, not just for themselves, but the history of their families. And so if you think of the silent generation, think World War II, the Depression, all of that time period. What's the biggest age lie that people told themselves from the silent generation? People lied about their age so they could join the army. Then you get into baby boomers. well, 46 to 64, we're kind of getting into the generation of Woodstock, but still all that stuff from mom and dad, aunt and uncles, grandmas and grandpas, wonderful family history. As you look into the newer generations, what did we lie about? What did our kids lie about? Well, maybe they lied about their age so they could drink earlier when they were in college. I don't know. But the case is, when we look at these different generations and the years between the generation and the gaps, it's more than a years, it's more than an age gap. It's a difference of how do we look at the things that we've saved, our treasures, the things that we love. Let's take a look at the next slide and see, why does all this matter? Well, it matters because as we're aging, we have some different requirements, and we need to start thinking holistically about where we are and what we have. Right now, we have the largest amount of people ever requiring healthcare, boomers and their parents. That's us. The first two generations that we looked at attach pride. We attach pride to our stuff. We worked hard to gain what we have. We know that our parents worked hard to gain what we have, and when they passed it down to us. But as we're looking at downsizing into either more affordable housing or better sized housing for our current living requirements, there is a shortage of affordable housing for downsizing. That's a consideration. We might have to move into a smaller facility, a smaller place, a condo, something that's not as large as what we might like, and we just don't have room for that stuff. And then, yes, requiring healthcare, the costs of healthcare are rising. And we know that a lot of us would prefer to age in place. We want to stay in our homes. We don't necessarily want to move, but more services are being provided within our home. Is our home set up with room to be able to provide those services? And AARP knows from various surveys, the number one thing that keeps people from leaving their home or being able to get the appropriate health care in their home is just the amount of stuff. Let's take a look at the next slide. And so based on a 2017 National Care Survey, majority of caretakers, and this includes family members, say that handling the stuff was the most stressful part of settling their parents or their relatives or their person they're caring for, of settling that estate. It's very, very difficult. And, if you've had elderly parents that you've taken care of, and now you need to settle their estate, even if they have all the wonderful legal documents in place that are so helpful, a will, who's going to get what, who's going to do what, that just plain does not usually cover everything. There's a lot to do and a lot of decisions to make. And it's very stressful. And it's very stressful because what's really, really hard on all of us, as we look at the next slide, we have to face the fact, next slide, that nobody wants our stuff. If you've talked to your kids, if you've talked with your grandkids, this beautiful set of silver that I have in a wonderful mahogany wooden chest, nobody wants that because they're never going to use it. And what about my mom's china? All of these things. I can tell you my mom had a wonderful trick, and I'll share this with you because, maybe it'll work for some of you. She would put together a little box as she was cleaning through things, and she'd put one or two things on top of the box that she knew that I actually wanted. And then everything else underneath was just stuff that she wanted to get rid of. So she wouldn't let me just take the one or two things. I had to take the whole box. Now I've got all that stuff, and she was happy as a clam because it was out of her house. So a little tip, but again, it's hard to face, and it's even harder to accept when you start trying to do something about downsizing and making room and organizing. It's hard because we realize our kids don't know those folks whose memories we have that we attach to those things. They just don't necessarily want it. And so that's why we're here today, because we've come to the realization, and I think probably many of you have as well, that we need to take some practical tips in terms of how to decide, what are we going to do with our stuff? Pat, you need to help us. Can you tell us some tips?
Yes. So as we go on to the downsizing and decluttering tips, I want to mention a couple of things to keep in mind. And one is, as Kay was alluding to, that a lot of different cultures and people collect things to honor where they came from, and there are strong emotional ties. And I think that's one of the things that people don't understand about this process until they start doing it, that it is very emotional. And a lot of this also comes from your parents who went through the Depression. So that's just something to keep in mind, that it takes longer because it's emotional. And also, the other thing is that if you have something that nobody wants, like china or something you were given in your family, but you don't have room for it and can't keep it, take pictures of it, because mainly what people want and what's important to you are the memories associated with it. And that is a way you can hang on to a piece of it. So anyway, let's take a look at some top 10 tips on how we get rid of our stuff. So first thing to know is that you need to include everyone in the house for this process. That means your husbands, your grandkids, everyone. And a lot of us have lived in houses for 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 plus years. And that's a lot of things. And that's another thing that you need to keep in mind as you go through this process. If you've lived in your house that long, why do you think you can downsize and declutter by yourselves in a weekend or two? Because it doesn't happen that way. It took a long time to get this stuff, and you need a lot of help. And one way you can get help besides your family is by enlisting the help of people who are internet savvy and know how to sell things online, and also how to give things away for free online. There's all kinds of different entities that help you do this, but it's really good to have the help of someone who can do this easily. We did this a lot when we were downsizing, but it takes a lot of research. It takes a lot of time. So if you have someone, again, who's savvy about doing this, try and enlist their help, whether it be a friend or a family member. And again, you can't do this by yourself. And don't exclude someone just because you think they won't want to help. And so part of this is the idea of breaking things down into small pieces, like any other big, overwhelming thing. Let's look at the next slide. So this is a way to start to break it down into small pieces by doing a 10-minute sweep. And this is the best way to clean out a room. Instead of looking at the room as a whole, look at small 2-foot by 2-foot areas. And you can compare this to losing 50 pounds. If you try and do it in a week, it doesn't work. But if you focus on 1 pound at a time, it can work. So have everyone in the family pick a 2-foot by 2-foot area where everyone cleans for 10 minutes. And it doesn't have to be in the same room because you may be getting in each other's way, but don't do it more than 10 minutes, but not less than 10 minutes. Set a timer. And maybe you can try this at night 10 minutes before your favorite TV show comes on, but stay consistent 5 nights a week, every week, and you'll see that your home will start to look clean after a few weeks. And I know this is a big commitment, but basically what we're trying to get across again is break it down into small pieces and it goes much better. And then you have to be consistent and schedule it in your calendar and keep doing it little by little. Okay, let's look at the next slide. So the third tip is to unpack bags. So what do you think is the proper way to unpack a bag after vacation? We often hear 2 answers. The first answer is immediately when you get home. The second answer is right before your next trip. The same holds true for grocery bags. When you get home, it's important to unpack them immediately. Don't put the bag down. If you put the bag down, it will get put away. The same thing is true for mail. Mail is like this too. You want to go through it as soon as you can and toss things as soon as you can, junk mail. So you should always unpack a bag immediately. And this can be your beach bag, your gym bag, or your grocery bag. Let's look at the next slide. So the next tip is that everything has a home or needs to. Don't let stuff you bring home stack up. Put everything where it's supposed to go. And again, mail is a common challenge. One idea is to sort it over your recycle bin before it comes into the house. And I routinely do this in my kitchen when I get the mail, because then there's less to do. And also keep your mail in a particular place. Don't have it all over the house, because that will let you see the volume of it and have you go through it. Because if it gets dispersed, it gets lost and you don't deal with it. Groceries should go in the kitchen. Tools should go in the garage. Clothes should go in your closet. And then that brings us to another rule that's really important. Equal in is equal out. And that means that when you bring something new into a home, something of the same size comes out, because you don't have unlimited space, and that's the way to manage it. Just because an item is on sale doesn't mean the home gets bigger. Next slide, please. So the fourth tip is a 4-pile sort. And this is really important. And this is something you can do all the time. And it's really good to set it up so that you do it all the time. You should have a container for things to keep, a container for things to sell, a container for things to donate, and a trash container. And if you, particularly donations, if you leave a box or a bag somewhere in your house to donate items, and you have it all the time, it's really easy as you're going through them to put it there and collect it. And so when it gets full, you go donate it. You know, the same is true for these other vessels, whether they be bags or bins or whatever. You fill them up and then you get rid of them or you sell them. And let's see. And it's important to put the sell and donate pile next to you and the keep pile far away. You really are going to look at it and analyze more whether you really want to keep it. And one thing I used to do when I lived in that 2-story house, I used to put things either in the guest bedroom closet or in the garage. And if I didn't go back and get it within, say, a week or two, if I, was going to get rid of something, then I didn't need it. I can let go of it. It helps just to have it out of sight and out of mind. Anyway, it's amazing to see how much you don't keep if it's a little out of the way. And then next slide, please. So the last tip is number 6 is to distribute legacy items now. Don't wait till you die. Do it now. Distributing legacy items means you don't tell a loved one that you're going to give them something when you're gone. Number one, it's nice to be able to gift things while you're around and to see if people really want it. And whenever you give a legacy item, you want to do it by telling the person that you're giving them this family heirloom, and you give it to them with the phrase that you can do with it as you please, because they may not want it. And then, you know, they can pass it on to someone else, they can sell it, but it's out of your house. So many times they want to wait to give things to their children when they pass, and the reality is you should give it to them now. And I already know from my experience, I have a Gen Z son who's 27. He's on the borderline of Gen Z. And basically, he doesn't really want much. We gave him some silver, which he didn't have much silverware, but he decided he didn't want it. He went online and sold it for more than I ever thought you'd get out of it, but he knows how to do that, which is fine. I'd rather he has the money. But he also is not interested in a lot of our furnishings, particularly oak furniture. Now, our generation mostly grew up with oak furniture, and our kids don't want it. My son likes mid-century modern, which is what I grew up with, and I don't really care for. So I think that's hilarious. Anyway, and make sure you really want to get rid of it now. And if you don't, then stop saying you'll give somebody something. Don't be surprised by the results. Lots of times we see people say they're going to give the piano away when they die. And when we push giving away the legacy item now, they decide not to give it. So as you go through this process of giving away family legacy items, ask yourself who would want the item, what meaning does it have? Share the legacy stories that are attached to the item with your family, write them down or record them. And remember, the younger folks in your family likely didn't know the people you associate with these items. Think about how you'll feel if your legacy items are rejected as unwanted. Think about the emotions attached to these items. Again, this is where you want to take pictures of these family legacy items, because you may not be able to keep them, you don't have room anymore, and maybe nobody wants them, but you can donate them or you can sell them. And if you have the picture, you can keep the memories. Let's see. I'm sorry, I think I went into one of yours, Kay.
That's just fine. You did fabulous. That was wonderful information. That was really good and really kind of got me thinking as well. I had also thought about taking pictures and then writing down or attaching a story that goes with that item about the person that it originally belonged to. And if you have some colorful folks in your ancestry that goes along with some of your legacy items, I think that's really exciting for kids and grandkids to be able to have the picture and the story, especially if they're into doing research on your family history. So number 7 of our helpful hints, we want to tell you to avoid punting. And so a good question would be, what the heck does that mean? Well, punting is when you convince somebody, maybe through guilt, that somebody in the next generation into taking an item that they really don't want, but you kind of guilt them into taking it anyway. That could be furniture that we kept from our parents because we knew that they were going to be upset if we said no. Think about my mom's box of stuff with 1 or 2 things on top that she knew that I wanted. You know, but the other stuff, things that your kids and grandkids don't really want, but you're trying to convince them to take it anyway out of an obligation for the family, for the memories. And, you know, the key is that those next generations, they don't feel that obligation that we might have felt. They simply don't want it. And how do we find out if they don't want it? We just ask them. We basically say, is this something you'd like to have? You know, be honest, feel free to say yes or no. You know, and if they say they don't want it, you know, don't say, well, you just don't know what you want yet. And then you save it for them anyway, because you're just so sure that it's so important to you, it must be important to them. So they're going to want it, you know, and that they're going to use it. You know, we have to all realize that our kids, our grandkids, nieces and nephews, they didn't know our grandmothers and grandfathers, great uncles. You know, my son, who is 49, is not going to know my great uncle that lived in South Dakota and grew up on the prairie. That really doesn't mean much to him. So, you know, the creamery can that I have in my living room sitting there from his farm, he probably doesn't care much about it, you know. So again, it doesn't have the meaning attached. So don't try to guilt your family member into taking something because you just don't know that you want it yet. Let's take a look at the next slide. And, you know, as Pat has said several times, donate, donate, donate. You know, the reality is that there's always somebody that needs our stuff more than we do. We have something sitting in the closet, in the kitchen cupboards, you know, things that we haven't seen in a year or used in 5 years. Somebody else could probably be using that. And the key is to focus on finding a place that you want to give something away to versus on how much it's worth. And so, yes, we probably all have a few items that are actually worth quite a bit of money, or even a bit of money. It's worth trying to sell those if you're happy doing that. But again, if it's something that has memories attached and meaning, take a picture, write the story, and donate that item to somebody that can really use it. And, you know, really, you know, we try to focus on giving to people that have a truly need for the items and can use the items immediately. Think in terms of places like Dress for Success for your clothes, donating clothes that you can't fit into maybe, or wear to that organization that then gives those people, they don't have to buy them, gives people clothes to wear to job interviews, to wear to work. They can use them right now. How about Soles for Souls? SOLES for SOULS. Shoes. I've got shoes. I rarely wear heels anymore because, well, I don't want to tip over, but that's another story. And so people can use those that would really love to have those shoes, and they're in wonderful condition. Tech for troops, electronics for veterans, Catholic charities, women's shelters. What about your old cell phones? Reset them to factory settings, and women's shelters can use those phones for victims of domestic abuse to be safe. So think in terms of that, you know, and again, you know, maybe you do have things that are quite valuable. Historical value. What about historical societies that would love to have those items? Or if you have art that's valuable or unusual, look at museums. They might like to have that as well, so where you can donate. So really be open in terms of the options that you have for the things that you now have just kind of sitting there that you're not doing anything with. Let's take a look at number 9 on the next slide. And, you know, I find this hard. Be realistic. And I guess maybe it's being realistic and being objective and maybe being honest is the hard part about clothes. And I'm willing to bet that more often than not, very many of us that are here today have clothes in our closet that we haven't been able to fit in for some time. But you know, dang it, I'm going to get back into that sweater or those pants, or they're in perfect condition. I just can't quite give them away. Why? You know, look at this picture on the screen and just imagine how the different sizes these pants could be for this gentleman. You know, the reality is, if you're the size you are now and you've got clothes that are 3 sizes smaller hanging in your closet, taking up room, there are people that could really, really use those clothes right now. It makes no sense to hang on to them because, again, being realistic, being objective, being honest, am I really going to lose those 25 pounds in the next 3 months and be able to fit into those clothes? I'm thinking there's a pretty good bet that that's not going to happen. So,
Kay, as you said too, that if you do lose the weight, by the time you fit back into those clothes, they're going to be way out of style.
you mean they're not going to come back in style?
Right.
Pat.
Not usually. And as you say, there's someone who could use them now. If you do lose the weight, you could repurchase them. It's okay.
That's right. And that's the way to be honest and objective. I'm pretty sure the leather pants that I wore in my 20s, now that I'm 70, I kid you not, they're in my closet and they're in perfect shape. I need to do something with those. That is just silly.
But, someone would be so happy to have them. And the other thing is that most of us don't need half the amount of clothes we thought we did when we were younger. As you get older and you retire, usually you have a style that you're comfortable with, and you're not going to wear a lot of things that you're not comfortable in, but that you collected over the years, and it's really good to give them to someone younger.
There's no question about it. Again, realistic, objective, and honest with ourselves. And something I had never thought about until I really started diving into this subject is the idea of food. And I thought, really? Keeping food, expired food on the shelf? Why do we hold on to food that, well, it only expired, last November. And didn't I read somewhere that it's good for another 6 months? Well, that was a year ago. Why do we hold on to that? Is it because of the stories that we know from our parents about being in the Depression and realistically not having enough food? I mean, that's why I clean my plate to this day, is because as I was growing up as a little kid, I was told that this is what we have and we're very thankful for it. And your papa worked very hard to get that food. And so it's hard sometimes to get rid of food. If there isn't a date on the food, you need to get rid of it. Food dating started in 1984. If you have cans in your cupboard that have no expiration date, it's expired. There's no date on it. And stop and think, if you've moved twice and moved the same group of canned goods with you, you're not going to use that food. You should really throw it out. And so let's take a look at number 10, our last helpful hint, which I think is really the hardest in terms of what to get rid of and what to keep. Paring down paper and photos, mail that you've kept, might be letters from people. Sometimes you definitely want to keep those. Sometimes there might be historical value to some of those. If it's, from, a relative that fought in the Civil War. Our family has a letter like that we've archived in glass, and it just gets passed down. That's different than just having some stacks of mail in a box or in a drawer. Take a look at that and shred it and get rid of it. Old documents and bills. Go online and find the latest examples and reference in terms of how many years do you need to keep legal documents. Yes, legal documents like your wills and that kind of thing, you absolutely need to keep. But what about old tax records? What about the sale of a house that you and your then husband purchased when you were in your 20s? Do you really need that documentation? Shred those. And photos are tough. You know, photos are hard because, again, we're back to where we started. The memories of having the documentation and the photo of those people that we knew, that we loved. And so we don't necessarily have to keep paper photos. Those can be digitized onto a CD, onto a thumb drive that we can plug into our computer and share those with folks in our family much more easily than giving them a box of stuff that they don't want with one or two things on top that they might. You know, the photos are tough. I still have a container of photos that my mom and dad kept under their bed for years. Then my dad kept it under his bed, and now it's upstairs and I need to do something with it. This contains photos of people that I have no idea who they are. They were taken in the early 1900s. It's historical. This is going to take a minute to try to figure this one out, but you get the idea. Photos are tough, but you can still take action with that. You know, the bottom line is, let's look at the next hint because we all have to face this. The bottom line is, we can't take it with us. Look at the pictures on the screen. At the very beginning of our session today, we showed you a picture of King Tut, beautiful funeral mask, all gold and gems. Well, the picture on the left, that was the stuff that was discovered in his tomb, in his garage. You know what? King Tut has been gone for a few thousand years. He didn't take it with him. He died and it was still there. Look at the picture on the right. Do we have rooms and garages that look like that? You know, when we go, and, you know, we're all going to go eventually, nothing is going to happen to that stuff unless somebody else then finally takes care of it. And we already talked about how stressful that is for folks. So he couldn't take it with him. Neither can we. And so we want you to dive in. I need to dive in, Pat, and start with these steps that we've talked about today. They're practical. They don't take a lot of time. They allow us to kind of start getting our head around what do we want to do with everything that's filling up our space. And, you know, the only thing that we can do is just plain start. Start small. Don't set an end date. It's going to take as long as it's going to take. Right. And usually not in that much of a hurry. So we just really need to start.
And Kay, before we go to questions that people have on the chat box, I'd like to just, when you're done, give out a couple more tips.
Yes, absolutely. Please.
Okay. So again, one thing I've learned from my experiences downsizing and decluttering over several moves, and this last one in 2019 to a much smaller house. A lot of people think they're going to have a garage or estate sale. And I've organized 4 or 5 myself. I'm an organized person, and I did that over the years. And, you know, sometimes they gave you a good amount of profit, sometimes not. You never can tell about these things. But think about it, because these sales take a lot of time and work to organize. And if you think the profit that you'll make far outweighs the cost and the effort, and again, you can't do this by yourself, you need other people to help you. You may then want to research a business that will organize and hold a sale for you. Now, I did this when we moved. I think I got 2 businesses to come over and give me estimates. And you want to check the online reviews and comments on the business. And then you want to ask the business what percentage of the profit they will take and how much you might get, because there are no guarantees and they're all a little bit different. And you need to be realistic about what your items are worth. Generally, you may be able to sell items for half or more likely less than you paid for it. And these services can also sell high ticket items online. Again, if you don't know somebody that can help you do this, some of these services will do that. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about how to get rid of your stuff. And the other thing is, keep in mind, as Kay said, if you donate electronics, you want to wipe the hard drives and delete the cloud apps to avoid access to your private accounts. And keep in mind too that donated items may be tax deductible. Check with your tax advisor and you can get an opinion on that. And so if we're ready for answering questions, how about if I read them, Kay, and then we sort of take turns answering? Or
Sure. Lots of great comments.
Yeah, we have a lot of them here.
That's
okay,
great.
So the first one is, I changed financial planners over 10 years ago. Do I need to keep all that information? Now, I can't give you an answer on this, but you can find this online as to what kind of financial information you need to keep and how long. That's what I would suggest. Do you have any other ideas, Kay?
Yeah, I would, if there were some very, very large transactions with your previous financial advisor, if you had any issues of why you left that advisor and went to somebody else, I would maybe keep some of those documents. Hopefully there would not be many, but again, like Pat said, in terms of financial documents, I usually keep a year of what's happening. And then, if there's anything like you've purchased stock options from your company before you retired, that kind of thing, I keep that documentation. It's like 2 pages. So, but, then go ahead and shred, use crosscut shredder. They're not expensive before you get rid of those pages. Don't just toss them out for recycling. Don't toss them in the recycling bin that's going to go with the garbage company that picks up your recycling bin. Or you can take them to a shredding event that groups like BECU have in the area that they advertise, and they take it away to a commercial shredder to where it's absolutely destroyed.
And AARP has a couple of those too.
Yes, they do.
Anyway, the next question, do we really need to keep all that packing material in original boxes? Now, I'm not sure what exactly you're referring to, but if you're keeping packing material in original boxes around a valuable item that you might want to sell, you might want to keep the original box and packing material, but otherwise probably not. And one thing to keep in mind too is that if you move, please put your packing material and your boxes on a free cycle site or some site online where people will be happy to come get them and take them away after you move for free, because you want to get them out of your space and they are glad to have them for free and not have to pay for them.
Yep, absolutely.
FYI, millennials are also known as Generation Y, and those born after 96 are considered Generation Z, right? Okay. My mom passed a little over 2 years ago, and I still have a ton of stuff to get rid of. No value to me, but guilt over giving it away. Again, take some pictures, see if you can find people or groups that really would value it, I would say, and that might help. What are your suggestions, Kay?
And the guilt is a real thing, something that was so important, an example. When I was like 13, my great aunt gave me, had rhinestones on it. It was a hair comb that had come over from Norway with her ancestors. Very old, very beautiful, means a lot to me. When I saw it, it was just thrown in a pile of junk in her basement with a whole bunch of newspapers. it broke my heart, and she knew it, so she gave it to me. She was very generous. She didn't care. It was just thrown there. And I felt so badly about it that I've treasured it ever since. I can guarantee you nobody else in my family is going to care about that the way that I do. But I feel guilty giving it away because I have that memory of how old it is. Should I sell it? Maybe. Should I donate it to the Norwegian Museum? Maybe. You know, so there are other options to try to go down that being realistic path. But the guilt is something that is, it's real. And again, documentation and pictures. So we have the memory. We don't necessarily just have the stuff.
So another comment, and recycling, so complicated and guilt-provoking. I think buy nothing groups on Facebook would be a good outlet for extra stuff. I'm listing my kitchen stuff later this month. And I've heard of buy nothing groups, and I think that's a great idea.
It's again, very good.
You're getting it to people who really need it, and you're getting rid of it.
That's right. I would caution people, and I think somewhere a gentleman down the line mentioned this too. I would caution people about having anyone come to your home to pick up stuff. Right. It's kind of like selling things on Craigslist. You know, if I sell my car on Craigslist, I really don't want anyone to come to my home. I live in the woods. We're pretty remote. I want to meet them somewhere to where they can see the stuff. And if they want it, they're going to take the box of stuff. And that way it's safer. You really need to think in those terms, unfortunately. Right.
And have someone with you, I think.
Yes, absolutely.
You go someplace, or if it's too big, you can't take it out of your house, then definitely have someone with you. Don't do it alone.
Absolutely.
Sure. And here's a question: how do I deal with awards and pictures? Again, awards, take photos of them. Pictures, I think Kay kind of covered that. You can have them digitized if you want. I would say, having gone through my parents' pictures and things, and mine, at the very least, when you're going through them, write who's in them on the back, even if you keep them and don't get rid of them, so that the next generation knows.
Or that 5 years from now, you remember who those people are because their name is on the back.
That too. So next comment: hard to when one spouse is very attached to stuff and the other isn't, and feels like they're drowning in it. Yes, that's hard. You need to negotiate. You may even need a third party to help with that. I don't know. I have stuff from when my dad passed 10 years ago. They don't mean anything to anyone, nor are they valuable. It was just stuff I wanted. Why? How do I get rid of it without the guilt? I mean, once I'm gone, no one wants it. And this Kay went into just a little bit. Again, all this is emotional, and you don't realize it until you're going through it. And here's a comment: stealth decluttering with a question mark. Anyway, laugh out loud. Done some of that, but it's dangerous. Yeah, that's especially if you're getting rid of your spouse's stuff, which they really want to hang on to or something. How do you connect with museums that might want unique artwork? Well, you call them, or generally online. But again, all this takes time. It takes time to get a response back. And I will say again, from my experience, both donating things just to charities and other things, it takes time. Most charities now have websites. They want you to upload pictures. They want details. And all this has gotten much more complicated after COVID. During COVID, they wouldn't take anything. And now they take less, and they also take less because they have less staff to deal with it. And also they won't pick it up in general because gas is too expensive. So again, these are all things to think about, and to know that it takes time to do this research.
It does. And, another organization or organizations that I might recommend, if you have things that have potentially historical value, are universities. And from my experience, I actually have like 3 containers of like little 3x5 cards. One side has the actual chart music of a song. The back of it has the artist, the writer, the lyrics. And these are all from the teens and the 20s and the early 30s. And so it was a big deal that people collected these back in the day. My dad had them from a friend. Now I've got them still, but I reached out to like the historical area and musical department of University of Washington, did some searching online and found an email address, and they referred me to different people in the university. And yes, they were aware of these types of collections. Quite a collection. I took a picture of an example and a whole 3 boxes of them, and they already have it. So they don't need more, but they said, here's someone from University of California down in San Diego, contact them. So I sent them my little pictures and sent them an email. Well, we have them too, but you know what? Go up to San Francisco and here's another person to contact at their university. I met a lot of people at a lot of schools. It was really kind of fun because I got a lot of background stories about this particular thing. Bottom line, nobody wanted it, but it was a fun exercise for me. So don't discount historical societies, universities, and just kind of being diligent about, well, if you're not interested, do you know of anybody? Because as you're going through your memories of some of this historical stuff, it really is kind of a fun exercise to go through. Plus, it's a way of putting off having to deal with the other stuff that you don't want to get started on.
Okay, so
I didn't say it and you didn't hear it.
Yeah. Another comment from somebody is, I have someone come in once a week for 3 hours to help me sort and get organized. And this is a great idea.
I love that.
If you can do this, hire someone, or if you have a friend who will do this. Again, because this stuff is so emotional for you when it's your stuff, it's really good for to have somebody there who doesn't have the emotion tied to it to help you go through it. So anyway, that can be a very good choice.
Yes, I love that.
Can you recommend legit organizations to find people to help with internet savvy choices if we don't have people in our circle who can? And I would say contact senior centers or contact community centers. They might know of someone. Also, partly the senior centers, because they usually do internet classes or have internet help for seniors. So there may be someone there or someone who knows someone. Kay, do you have other ideas?
If you don't have kids or grandkids, how about your friends? Do you have any friends that have kids or grandkids?
Yeah.
And even like younger grandkids are pretty savvy online, pay them a few bucks for an hour of their time. They're going to think it's a big deal to go help and do research for you of what you're looking for. And you can just, sit with them.
And the younger generation can do it so fast. It's, I did some of this myself after learning a few things, but my son could have done it 2 or 3 times as fast, I'm sure. Anyway, no mention of recycling yard waste. I try and keep stuff out of the landfill. Yes, that's another reason to donate anything you can that's usable. I recommend Ridwell if it's available in your area. I'm not familiar with them, but and another comment, giving heirlooms now also prevents arguments later on. Yes, that's very true. That's really, really true.
Been through that.
Amber, I would put all the stuff in one room and invite friends and family over to get what they want. If they take it, they wanted it. One man's junk, woman's junk is another man's or woman's treasure. And yes, that's true. And as we were downsizing our big house before our move, we did get to that point. We invited a lot of our neighbors over to go through anything in our garage that was left to take whatever they wanted. And we gave a whole car full of stuff to my sister to take down to family in Oregon. So any ideas, Kay, on that?
Yeah, I think you've hit on them. It's like, and that's kind of a theme. I've been kind of scrolling through several of the comments, and I love the idea of putting everything in a room and having the family come over, maybe have a big potluck and have them come over, and with the idea of taking what they would like. And that, that might be easier than having the garage sale, which a lot of times when we're cleaning out our parents' stuff or someone who's passed, that's kind of the next step. And that is tough. What's the value? You don't know. Then you got people coming to the house. It just goes on, and it's a lot of work for not that much of a return. When if people want stuff, they can take what they really want, and you can feel good about that.
Plus, I have to say that since COVID, people don't shop garage sales the way they used to.
That's right.
My husband and I used to shop them too when we had more room. We don't do it much now, but
good for you.
but also, as I said, I organized 4 or 5, and it's not only a lot of time and a lot of work, but now I have asthma and I can't be around all that dust. So you have to really think about it. Sometimes it's just better to donate, and especially if you really want to deal with it quickly.
That's right.
Let's see. What about old engineering books? Again, you might contact a university. One thing I did find out was that Seattle Public Library will take 1 bag of books per day in donation, but it has to be 1 per day. You can't take any more than that. Unfortunately, I didn't find that out so quickly, so we had to deal with our books in another way generally, but you can talk to the library about that. I don't know if anybody wants them. I mean, these days, it's so expensive to even ship them overseas. Nobody does that anymore either. So
it's all online.
Yeah. My mother-in-law is notoriously trying to punt things to me. I'm steadfast and keep saying no. I have to leave. Will the recording be available? Yes. If someone could email me, amber.doreen@yahoo.com. Yes, we can do that. Okay, could you write that down?
Actually, Ashley responded.
Ashley will have it, yeah.
Yeah, and to let folks know that it would be.
She's said, yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes our children, grandkids get older and they change their mind about items. How long is it reasonable to wait? I don't know.
Do they give it back? Is that the question? They want to give it back to you?
I think they're saying they don't want it now, and maybe grandparents are waiting, keeping it at their house till they want it. I'm saying, I don't know, if children don't want to take it for the grandkids possibly now and save it in their attic or garage, I don't think you should wait any more than a year at the most.
Yeah, that's really an individual discussion, especially if you're downsizing and moving. You know, they might not have room but want it, but you definitely are not going to have room if you're moving. And so they need to make a decision. How are they going to manage that if they really, really want it?
And the other thing to remember is with the younger generations, which are much more mobile than we were, and certainly than our parents were, they're going to move. So they don't want heavy furniture. They want easy to move furniture, like from IKEA, and lighter weight things. They also are not going to be at the same company for a 30-year career. They're going to change companies and employers. And so they are not going to necessarily stay in the same place. I mean, the general trend now, I think, is for people to be in jobs 2 or 3 years. So you have to keep that in mind too. And this is one of the reasons why younger people don't want our stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, these are great comments. I love the recommendations that folks have shared and the comments folks have shared. I think that that's really helping all of us as we're going through these. And I'm sure you all have been reading those. We have come up against our time, however.
Yes.
And these are such, like I said, the comments from y'all have just been terrific and very helpful for everyone. But we really thank you for joining us today, and be aware that this session has been recorded and will be available on Facebook, the AARP Washington Facebook page. You can go and find that and just click on the link and watch all or part of this again for to get these great tips. And for Pat and I, Pat, thank you so much. Great job. Your experience has been super helpful for all of us. And you're giving me hope to get started somewhere beyond my Christmas decorations that I went through this year.
You can do it.
I can do it.
Can we look at the last slide?
I think this is the last slide. Oh,
no,
there
we have this one. So we just want to mention to people that AARP Washington also has more virtual presentation on things like fraud and cybercrime prevention. And we have one called Home Fit, which is basically for seniors as they age, how to keep their homes safe and make adjustments so that they will be safe and avoid falls in their home. We also have a series of 4 Living Longer, Living Smarter presentations. These are half hour each. We usually do 2 at a time. And that talks about reviewing where you live and whether that's going to suit your needs over time, and also reviewing your finances and those kind of plans. And then we also have one called Prepare to Care, and this is for caregivers. AARP has lots of resources, and this presentation talks about where to find resources when you're caring for a family member or someone who needs a caregiver. So to learn more, you can either go to our website or contact Ashley Aiken at the web address there. And again, thank you everyone for joining us. We appreciate it.
Yep, thank you so much.
Tell your friends. We do this often.